Imagine, just for a second, holding the keys to the treasury of an empire that stretches across the entire known world. I mean, you possess absolute political, military, and economic power.
Right. You essentially have a blank check.
Exactly. You could build palaces, surround yourself with legions of guards, and basically never have to look at the dirt of the streets again.
Which is what most rulers in history did.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine that when the day is done, instead of going to a palace, you go home to a simple mud brick hut, and you sit down to eat a piece of barley bread that is so stale and so hard that you literally have to break it over your knee before you can even chew it.
It completely dismantles the traditional fortress of power we're so used to seeing, you know? I mean, we typically assume that managing an empire requires a certain elevation, like a detachment from the messy day-to-day suffering of the masses.
All right, you manage from the balcony, you don't get down in the mud. But today, we are looking at a stack of sources, historical texts, recorded sermons, classical narratives, centered on a 7th century figure who entirely upended that assumption. We're talking about Imam Ali.
Yeah.
So we're taking a deep dive into this material today to look at a blueprint for leadership that feels, honestly, almost unfathomable today. We're looking at radical justice, uncompromising equality, and a level of personal philanthropy that goes way beyond just signing a decree.
What's incredibly compelling about these sources is that they don't define his legacy by the immense territory he controlled.
Right.
They define it by how he deployed every ounce of his authority to protect the absolute weakest members of that society. It's an evocative, deeply challenging approach to statecraft. It really forces you to rethink what true leadership actually looks like.
I want to jump straight into one of the most striking narratives from these texts because it gets right to the heart of what you just said. It's the account of the public treasury hunt.
Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah, so large containers of honey arrive in the city, destined for the public treasury. And the standard administrative move here is pretty obvious, right?
Yeah.
You hand it off to the bureaucrats, they measure it out, and they distribute it via standard rations to the populace.
Right. It's an administrative task. You process the intake, you distribute the output.
Exactly. But Imam Ali disrupts the standard operating procedure. While the general distribution is happening, he specifically calls for the city's orphans to be brought directly to the treasury.
Yeah.
And instead of giving them like a measured cup to take home, he personally lets them eat the honey directly from the containers.
Which, from an administrative standpoint, is highly unorthodox.
Right. Okay, so let's unpack this. Why use this specific, slightly messy method? I mean, why let them eat directly from the container instead of just serving them respectfully in cups like everyone else? From a purely logistical angle, it seems kind of inefficient.
Well, what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of his action. The sources tell us that one of his own companions actually asked him this exact question, like, why this perplexing behavior?
Yeah, what'd he say?
Imam Ali's response was, "Indeed, an imam is the father of the orphans, and I let them eat directly as an expression of compassion from a father."
Oh, wow. He's stepping into the role that they lost.
Precisely. And if we look closely at this, we see a profound insight into how we understand welfare. Usually we think of welfare as purely caloric or economic, right?
Yeah, like checking a box.
Exactly. We check a box that says, the orphans have been fed today. But Imam Ali recognized that the trauma of being an orphan isn't just a lack of resources. It's a deficit of dignity, of warmth and indulgence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Letting a kid eat honey right out of the jar, that's a joy. That's a specific kind of informal, deeply personal love that a parent allows. He was actively trying to restore that psychological warmth.
That is a massive distinction. I mean, the difference between just giving someone calories and actually giving them dignity, it changes the entire definition of what it means to provide for a population.
It really does.
And it perfectly sets up another account from the texts about this idea of personal labor. It's the story of the widow.
Right, a narrative that really highlights the physical toll of his philosophy.
Yeah. So the story goes that Imam Ali is walking through the city and sees a widow struggling to carry this heavy, water-filled animal skin. He steps in to help her, carries the water to her home, and in the process learns that her husband actually died fighting in his own army.
Wow.
Yeah, and she's now completely destitute, trying to raise her young children all alone. Now, keep in mind, he is the head of state. He has the entire treasury at his disposal.
Right.
He could just snap his fingers, establish a royal pension for her, or, assign a servant to her household and consider the job done.
That would be the efficient, bureaucratic solution.
But he doesn't do that. Instead, he returns to her house disguised. He proceeds to chop her wood, carry her water, and cook meat for her children.
Yeah, he takes it all on himself.
There's even a detail where he distracts the kids by playing with them and baking bread so the mother can finally rest. And he does all of this without ever revealing his true identity to her. She has absolutely no idea that the man sweeping her floor is the ruler of the Islamic Empire.
He essentially becomes a servant to the most vulnerable person in his domain.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the modern equivalent of this.
Yeah.
It's not just like a CEO mowing a struggling employee's lawn on the weekend. It's the head of a global superpower, in the middle of managing a deeply fractured empire, secretly doing the domestic chores of a single citizen just to relieve her burden.
Right.
But why the secret? I mean, why not just tell her, I am the ruler and I am here to help you?
Because if he tells her who he is, the dynamic instantly shifts from compassion to power. She becomes beholden to the state. By remaining anonymous, he preserves her pride. She doesn't have to perform gratitude for the emperor. She just gets to rest. It shows that his intense, hands-on empathy wasn't just a PR stunt. It governed how he spent every single resource he had, no matter how limited.
And his resources were incredibly limited, which actually brings us to the urgency of his giving. It wasn't just his labor he was giving away, it was his own personal wealth.
Yes.
The historical text outlined this very specific story of the 4 dirhams. At one point, Imam Ali's entire net worth, like everything he owned to his name, was exactly 4 silver coins.
That's it. Just 4 coins.
Right. And he gave them all to charity, but in a very deliberate way. 1 at night, 1 by day, 1 in secret, and 1 in public.
The Quran actually references this specific event, celebrating the person whose wealth is only 4 coins, but who spares absolutely nothing for himself. But the mechanism and how he gave it is what's really crucial here.
That's what I want to dig into. Why divide 4 coins into 4 specific categories? Why not just hand all of them to the first person he sees?
Because he was establishing a comprehensive philosophy of giving. Giving at night or in secret protects the dignity of the recipient and prevents the giver's ego from swelling. It's an act of pure, unseen service.
Right. It's totally selfless.
But giving by day or in public is equally necessary because it normalizes charity. It sets a societal standard. By utilizing all 4 methods with his only 4 coins, he was demonstrating that philanthropy must penetrate every dimension of human interaction, regardless of how little you have.
And speaking of immediate in-the-moment philanthropy, here's where it gets really interesting. The sources detail an event that pushes this concept of urgency to its absolute limit. It's the story of the ring.
Yes, a very famous account.
Right. So Imam Ali is in the mosque in the middle of his prayers. Specifically, he's in the state of ruku, which means he's bowed forward, hands on his knees. A beggar walks into the mosque asking the congregation for help, but everyone ignores him.
Yeah.
So Imam Ali, without breaking his physical posture of bowing, simply stretches out his finger and signals for the beggar to slide his ring off and take it.
This is an event immortalized across numerous classical texts and commentaries.
But I have to push back on this a little because it feels almost like a contradiction. Isn't prayer supposed to be a time of total, unbroken communion with the divine?
You'd think so, yeah.
Right. You're supposed to be blocking out the distractions of the world. Why not just wait until the prayer was over? It would have taken maybe 2 more minutes. Wouldn't giving the ring mid-prayer be considered a distraction?
That is the natural question to ask, sure. But it assumes that the world and the divine are entirely separate spheres.
Okay, go on.
In the framework Imam Ali operated within, the texts explain that an act of goodness requires expedition. You do it without hesitation. What this tells us, and it completely flips our modern understanding of focus, is that true philanthropy cannot be scheduled.
Wow.
Yeah, it isn't something you put on a calendar for when you've finished your current task.
So you're saying the distraction wasn't a flaw in the prayer?
Exactly. Ignoring the immediate cry of a suffering person in order to finish a prayer would have been a violation of the very principles he was praying about. His awareness of the beggar wasn't a break in his connection to the divine. Responding to that suffering was an active, urgent expression of it.
I see. The compassion is the focus. But I want to pivot here, because it's one thing to be radically generous with your own 4 coins or your own personal ring. It's entirely another to manage the macroeconomics of an empire.
Oh, absolutely. The scale changes everything.
Right. When we transition from personal charity to systemic statecraft, things usually get very pragmatic very quickly. How does a man with this philosophy actually govern a state treasury?
Well, this is where his legacy becomes incredibly disruptive to the political norms of his time. When he assumed leadership, he inherited a deeply entrenched system of patronage.
Let's elaborate on that system because it's vital context for you listening.
Hmm.
From my reading of the sources, the previous administrations had established a tiered distribution of the public wealth. The Beit al-Mal is essentially the central bank. And they were paying out stipends based on a person's tribal status, their lineage, or how early they had converted to the faith. So the elites were getting vastly more money than the commoner.
Correct. It was an Arabian class system built directly into the state's economic policy. It bought the loyalty of powerful tribal leaders.
Mhm.
But when Imam Ali took over, he abolished that tiered system overnight.
Just like that.
Just like that. He mandated that every single citizen receive the exact same share from the treasury, regardless of their status.
And there's a specific incident that illustrates the fallout of this. Two women come to Imam Ali to claim their share from the treasury. One is an Arab woman from a prominent lineage, and the other is a non-Arab woman, a Mawali, who were historically treated as second-class citizens.
Yeah.
In the society of that time, the Arab woman would expect a significantly larger payout. But Imam Ali gives them the exact same amount, 25 dirhams, and a standard measure of food. The Arab woman actually protests this, pointing out her superior lineage.
And Imam Ali's response was to explicitly reject that premise. He stated that he had looked at the Book of God and found no preference for the progeny of one lineage over another when it came to dividing public funds.
That's huge.
He was dismantling racial and social supremacy through economic policy.
He didn't even bend the rules for his own blood. The sources mention his brother, Akwel, who came to him privately. Akwel was struggling financially and asked for an advance on his stipend from the public treasury.
Right, a fairly common request for a relative of a ruler.
Exactly. But Imam Ali flatly refused him. He essentially said, I can give you from my own personal money, but I cannot give you a single unauthorized cent from the public wealth.
He even went so far as to hold a heated iron near his brother's hand to remind him of the fires of divine justice. He explained that taking from the public trust was akin to stealing from the entire populace.
Okay, but let's look at this pragmatically. Refusing your brother is one thing, but cutting the stipends of powerful generals and tribal elites, isn't that political suicide?
It definitely ruffled a lot of feathers.
I mean, if you alienate the very people who command armies by paying them the exact same as a peasant, aren't you destabilizing the state? Didn't his absolute idealism actually cause massive civil wars?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, it absolutely did. His refusal to compromise on justice sparked immediate, severe political friction.
Yeah, they weren't going to just let that go.
Exactly. Powerful elites who were used to getting the lion's share of the treasury rebelled against him. They launched wars. But for Imam Ali, avoiding war was not worth the price of institutionalizing corruption.
So he consciously chose political instability over economic injustice.
He would not buy political loyalty with public funds, period. To do so would mean stealing from the widow and the orphan to pay off a wealthy general.
That's incredibly principled.
And this unyielding philosophy is perfectly crystallized in the famous letter he wrote to his governor, Malik al-Ashtar. Malik was being sent to govern Egypt, which was a highly diverse province with many different religions and ethnicities. Imam Ali wrote a comprehensive directive on how to treat the subjects of the state, and he penned this incredible legal mandate regarding the citizens. He wrote, "They are of two types, either your brother in religion or your like in creation."
Your brother in religion or your like in creation. That leaves absolutely no loophole for treating anyone as other or as a second-class citizen.
It's a universal declaration of human rights, centuries ahead of its time. And the only reason he could govern with such unyielding strictness and demand such integrity from his governors was because he partook in absolutely none of the empire's luxuries himself.
Right, the mechanism of his authority was his own deprivation. The sources describe a lifestyle that is shockingly austere. We mentioned the hard barley bread earlier, but it goes further. While ruling this massive territory, he lived in a humble hut.
Yeah.
He wore an old patched cloak. There's an account of him shivering in the winter cold, and when someone asked why he didn't just take a warmer cloak from the treasury, he replied that the cloak he was wearing was the exact same one he had brought with him from his home city of Medina years ago.
He stated that God had made him the imam of the people and therefore made it obligatory for him to reduce his personal comfort so that his standard of living equal that of the most indigent citizen.
Wow.
He asked a brilliant rhetorical question. He said, "Should I content myself with this, that people call me the commander of the faithful, and I should not share the vicissitudes of life with them?"
But logically, the sheer psychological weight of this is staggering.
Yeah.
Think about
अगर
it.
आपको
You are
हमारा ये
constantly
कंटेंट
facing
पसंद
political
आया है
betrayal from
तो हमें
elites who want
सपोर्ट
more
करें,
money.
लाइक
Yes.
करें,
You are
कमेंट करें
managing
और
the
शेयर
logistics of
करें
an empire.
और हमें ज़रूर
You are
बताएं कि
physically
आप
exhausting
अगली
yourself
वीडियो
at
किस
night by
मौजू पर
secretly
देखना
carrying
चाहते
water for
हैं
widows.
और हमें
And you are
सब्सक्राइब करना
surviving
ना
on stale
भूलें।
bread and vinegar.
शुक्रिया।
Most leaders would collapse under the stress or they would compromise just to find some peace. Where did this boundless energy and this absolute refusal to break actually come from?
That brings us to the core mechanism of his resilience, the inner engine that made all of this outward action possible.
There is a story about this from a companion named Abu al-Darda that really arrested my attention.
Yeah.
Abu al-Darda is out in an oasis, away from the city, and he happens upon Imam Ali praying in the dark.
Right.
But it's not a standard, quiet prayer. He is weeping so profoundly in such a deep state of supplication that he suddenly goes rigid and collapses. Abu al-Darda shakes him, gets no response, and actually thinks he has died.
It's a terrifying moment for him, I'm sure.
Yeah, he runs back to the city in a panic to tell Imam Ali's wife, Lady Fatima. But she isn't panicked at all. She calmly explains that this isn't a medical emergency. This frequently happens to him due to his immense awe and fear of the divine.
It describes a state of total, overwhelming spiritual absorption.
So what does this all mean? I'm looking at this man who faints from spiritual intensity in an oasis, and I'm trying to connect him to the confident, active, utterly fearless statesman who stares down rebellious generals over treasury funds.
Yeah, it seems like a paradox.
It really does. Usually we think of intense mystics as being hermits, withdrawn from the world, not actively managing complex economic policies.
This raises an important question about how we view the relationship between internal faith and external action. We often see them as opposites. But in Imam Ali's framework, knowledge, worship, and action are a single mechanism. Think of the oasis not as an escape, but as calibration.
Calibration, like resetting a compass.
Exactly. When you are managing an empire, the magnetic pull of politics, wealth, and compromise is incredibly strong. It distorts your direction. His total surrender and vulnerability before the divine in private was the exact mechanism that allowed him to remain completely unbreakable in public.
That makes perfect sense.
Because he bowed so deeply to the divine in the dark of the oasis, he found it impossible to bow to any worldly pressure, wealth, or tyrant in the light of day.
The vulnerability in prayer actually manufactured the strength for governance.
His spiritual life wasn't a retreat from his philanthropic ideals. It was the engine that powered them. He taught that there is no goodness in worship without thoughtfulness. So every time he divided the treasury equally, every time he chopped wood for a widow, every time he let an orphan taste honey from his hand, these were all just extensions of that deep prayer in the oasis.
It's a seamless integration of the spiritual and the intensely practical. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring a figure who essentially dismantled the architecture of traditional power. We started with the incredibly tender image of a ruler restoring the dignity of orphans by letting them eat honey directly from his hands.
And we saw the radical urgency of his compassion giving away his ring in the middle of prayer because the cry of the needy cannot wait for a convenient time.
We looked at the sheer political danger of his systemic justice, holding the line on absolute equality in the public treasury, refusing to bribe the powerful, and choosing to live like the poorest citizen so he could authentically share their
अगर
struggle.
आपको हमारा ये कंटेंट पसंद आया है तो हमें सपोर्ट करें, लाइक करें, कमेंट करें और शेयर करें और हमें ज़रूर बताएं कि आप अगली वीडियो किस मौजू पर देखना चाहते हैं और हमें सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें। शुक्रिया।
Final thought on the table for you to mull over.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked extensively about grand systemic justice, central banks, and empire-wide governance. But if a man responsible for the survival of an entire empire could somehow find the time and the energy in the dark of night to secretly carry a heavy skin of water for a single destitute widow, what small secret act of radical compassion are you capable of doing in your own community today?
What a profound question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into these incredible classical sources. Keep learning, keep questioning the narratives around you, and the next time you think of power as a high-walled fortress separating the ruler from the rules quarter, remember the man who tore the walls down, went out into the night, and chopped wood for the fatherless. We'll see you next time.
If you like this content, please like, comment and share. Tell us what topic you want to see next. And don't forget to subscribe.